I wanted to pop in here really quick to mention that VA to 60 days is opening up this month. That's right. You heard me. No longer am I hiding behind my fear. I'm actually going to open a course that I've been thinking and talking about releasing myself for a long time. What is a virtual assistant? It is someone who helps anyone online prolong, expand, enhance their business with things that you can do for them at home. So that could be a business that is a brick and mortar business, or it could also be a business that someone is doing online and they need to free up some of their time. There is literally a list of 100 things that you could do and offer as a virtual assistant that range anywhere from email management to social media management, website design, invoicing, customer service. The list goes on and on and on. And after so many years of women asking me how to expound their business and also how to create a business from home, I thought a virtual assistant is truly the answer to both. And so I have created this all-inclusive 7-week program where I will take you step by step, ins and outs of how to create your own virtual assistant program. Here's the thing. This is the first time I am releasing this offer. And so this is a beta launch price. It will never be this low again. If you're interested in that and you think that this is something that could be a good fit for you, you want to be able to be your own boss, create your own hours, be able to stay at home and be with your kids and do the thing that you love the most, which is being a mom, but also have something for you and more spending cash, come to my free webinar that's actually happening on June 8th, 9th, and 10th. They will be live, and I will be walking you through what it takes to be a successful virtual assistant and what kind of a commitment and opportunity that is for you. And I promise you, it is such an incredible opportunity because more than ever, businesses are growing, thriving online, and also finding outsourcing for wonderful employees like yourselves that can call the shots, pick the clients that you want, and also create an opportunity for you to grow a business that you love. This really has been a passion project. My husband keeps asking me again and again, why are you doing this? And truly it's because I want to gift other people the same opportunity I've had to develop and grow a business from home and have the luxury and the privilege of being at home with my kids. So if that sounds like something that appeals to you, I would love it if you join me. Hop into this webinar. There are so many incentives for showing up live, free bonuses. So I hope that you will do that. Come to camillewalker.co to learn more, and I can't wait to see you there. I'll be the first to admit that I am not the most political person. I don't consider myself an expert. I didn't grow up in a family that liked discussing politics. However, in the past year and a half, I feel like politics has been something that even my family has discussed regularly around the dinner table. I do feel like it is important to stay educated and to also create an environment where our children feel that it is okay and necessary to learn both sides of the conversation so that they can come together to make a greater whole. Today, we are learning from one of my favorite politicians, as it were. Technically, she's not a politician, but she has helped in political debates. Her name is Elisha Krauss. She is a conservative commentator, writer, and podcaster, currently the host of Washington Examiner Newsmaker series, and was a previous contributor at the Ben Shapiro Daily Wire show. Elisha got into radio at only 18 years old, becoming the youngest radio producer at ABC in history. Fun fact is she's actually a college dropout, but has continued in her career to do some incredible things, producing morning radio shows with Sean Hannity and Dan Shapiro. I love this conversation with her so much as we talk about how she rose into the ranks of radio shows, politics as a woman, how she's been able to hold her own voice and create a wonderful, healthy environment for her family where they discuss politics, but it's not part of the dinner conversation. So this show is about you. It's about how you can learn how politics can be a part of your life, but not control your life, and also how to create healthy boundaries around that as you continue on this path. So you want to make an impact. You're thinking about starting a business, sharing your voice. How do women do it that handle motherhood, family, and still chase after those dreams? We'll listen each week as we dive into the stories of women who know. This is Call Me CEO. Welcome back, everyone, to Call Me CEO podcast. Today, I am sitting with the lovely and talented Elisha Krauss, who is the Washington Examiner Newsmaker series host, as well as the co-host of the I'm going to mess up the name.
Lady Brains
podcast. Thank you. I just had it there. I am so excited to talk with you today. Thank you so much for being here.
Well, thank you. As a woman, like we both got 4 kids in the house, although you almost have a teenager. So I need all that advice because our oldest is a tween. It is like so hard to schedule out things in 30 to 60 minute slots. And my husband and I were joking earlier this morning. I'm like, sometimes like a work trip or going to a speech feels like vacay because I can listen to my podcast instead of Kids Bop. And like, this is nice because I feel like I'm having an uninterrupted adult conversation for 45 minutes.
It really is. I think that that's so true because especially during COVID and being at home and not really seeing people as much, I feel like starting the podcast really did fill up that cup for me of having adult conversation and feeling like you expand your own walls, right?
Yeah. At least I hope I didn't jinx anything by saying uninterrupted because we haven't finished yet. It could be interrupted.
It wouldn't be the first time. So tell me about your family. I'm so excited to dive into everything that you have going on because there is a lot, and that is very much what our audience is used to and relates to. So tell us about your home and your family.
Yeah. So we live in Southern California. We live in the Valley of Los Angeles. My husband and I have been married almost 12 years. Our little doggy, also almost 12 years, just passed away. So that was sad.
Oh.
It was like the girl's first, like pet loss. But interestingly, my 7.5-year-old has pretty decent theology down because she was telling the 3.5-year-old that the dog's body is in the ground, but the soul is in heaven, kind of like humans. So I was like, good religious studies on me. Pat myself on the back there. So my husband, Eric, and I met a bajillion years ago, on the road for work. His mother moved in with us 4 years ago. I joke that we're her retirement plan, but she's a huge help because she watches the 2 littles who are 3.5 and 1.5 during the day while I homeschool the 5th and the 1st grader, all girls. So it's all dress up and dance parties all the time. So much so that I think I'm just going to toss all of the toys that have nothing to do with crafts or Legos because they don't even play with them anymore.
I can relate to that. Aside from all of that, the dress ups, the Legos, and the crafts, those are the favorites in our house too.
Mm-hmm.
Now, tell me, I want to hear about your background in media. You've been doing media since you left your family home at 18. Tell me how did that start and how did you know that was the path for you?
I don't know that if I felt like it was the path. I was always a political nerd. So I kind of envisioned myself, I think. So I'm from Southeastern Oklahoma. We moved there when I was 7. My dad is from there as well. I consider that where I was raised. So my like childhood home, my parents still live there. And middle of nowhere, but I was lucky that I was able to travel throughout my childhood because my father was a pilot and we could fly for free. And so we would fly standby, and we're a very small family. My dad's an only child. My mom has one brother who is a recently retired Navy SEAL. So he was always based in cool places like Pensacola and DC and Corpus Christi and Hawaii and Guam. And so I grew up getting to go to those places, all except Guam, which I'm still a little bitter about. But I'm pretty spoiled because we grew up going to Hawaii a few times throughout my childhood. And so I was always a political nerd. I always enjoyed travel. And I think I envisioned myself like maybe after college going to be like a staffer, like a congressional staffer on the Hill. And I fell into talk radio. So I went to the King's College and I'd always had a job. My mother didn't believe in allowances, but as soon as we were like legally able or had a neighbor that would pay us to do something, she was 1,000% pro us going to do that. And so I used to literally shovel and rake chicken, like for some Tyson farmers next door. I used to like weed my grandparents' garden for a couple of bucks. A girlfriend and I used to make like fudge and sell it. So I always was kind of working from the time I was like 10 or 11 years old. And then when I got my driver's license, I was homeschooled. And so I would get up at like 5 a.m., knock out my homework, and then go nanny and then work a part-time job at like a mini gopher. It was called Go for a Golf and Go for a Spin, but GOPHER. And so by the time I was 18 and in school, it was my first classroom experience, which I loved. Like I loved the interaction and like dialogue and debate and discussion and stuff. But I was a little bored outside of the classroom, which seems weird to say because I was living in freaking New York City, which is not a boring city at all. And I started Googling internships, and I got an internship at WABC. And I worked on two early morning show and a mid-morning show. So I worked on the Curtis and Kuby show and then John Gambling show. And then in the afternoons, like 3 days a week. And then in the afternoons, 4 days a week, I was working on the Sean Hannity radio show. And when I went home for Christmas break, the senior producer at the time emailed me and said, "Hey, do you have enough elective credits that you could come back in the spring semester?" And I was like, "Sure." And so then I went back and interned again in the spring, and I was like the head of the internship program, which was like me just telling two other interns what to do. And then 2 weeks before my spring finals, Sean and the producer, Rachel Yamini, who's great and like taught me so much and probably put up with a lot of like immaturity and stupidity on my part. She pulled me into her office, and Sean was there, and they said, "Okay, so we need a new call screener and associate producer, and we want to offer you the opportunity to train for the role. And we know you're in school full time, but we think that you can give the 3 months over summer a trial run, like start after finals and give it a trial run. And if you don't like it, you can go back to school full time in the fall. And if we don't like you, you can go back to school in the fall." And so I always joked that I stuck around for 7 years because nobody ever asked me to leave. And I was the associate producer for a couple of years. And then when Rachel left the show to, just do a little thing like go to the London School of Economics for her master's, I, as the college dropout, which I find hilarious, ended up being the senior producer of the show. And and so I was in New York and with Sean for almost like 8 years.
Wow.
And and then that was a pause point in my career where my husband and I decided to leave New York. We were one of those people that New York is such a transient city, even more so than Los Angeles, I think. And I always tell people, if you are single with no kids, like give New York a try for a year. I think everyone should give it a try. Even if you know that you don't want to be in a city long term, I think there's so much that you can learn about yourself and about human nature and business and finance and media and all that stuff if you give New York City a try. And then you experience all the seasons and the pros and the cons of the city. And it's actually really sad. I feel like during COVID, the city's just changed dramatically and lost a lot of its beauty and grit that existed there. And I hope that it can be revived. But back in 2011, my husband and I had a moment where we were sitting on our kitchen floor and we were like, we keep getting job offers that aren't in New York. And we love being in New York, but maybe it's time to leave. And we had seen so many friends come in and out of the city and they just got burned and they ended up hating it and they never wanted to come back. And we were like, we don't want to be that way. We want to always don't quit your job until you have another one lined up. Like we always wanted to have that leave on a high note, like not burning any bridges, where if we could come back, that we still had a love of the city. And so we left New York still with a love of the city and an openness, I think, to potentially go back one day. Although I don't think I could do that with like small children, maybe like teen children. And so we left New York and took a sabbatical. We lived in Hawaii for a little bit. Then I got an offer to run a congressional campaign actually in my home district back in Oklahoma. It was a bucket list item. I was probably wholly too poorly inexperienced. Learned so much. I joked that they got two for the price of one. The campaign provided my husband and I a 1989 like Buick beater. It was so bad that like when you're driving up a hill in the middle of a 110-degree July day in Oklahoma, like the AC wouldn't work.
Oh no.
And it's like do you just like leave the windows up to keep the air that you currently had trapped, or do you roll down the windows to get some fresh air, but then it's going to be like 110 degrees blowing at you. And then after that, we went to Michigan outside of Detroit, where my husband's from, and trying to figure out what was going on with our lives, and got pregnant with our firstborn. And I got a call from the guy that had originally hired me to be an intern at WABC, Phil Boyce. I believe he's still at Salem Media now. And he was chatting with me about this morning show with this guy named Ben Shapiro and a liberal host who I'd booked previously because he did really good impersonations, named Brian Whitman. And he was like, I want to add a female to the show. And I thought that he was calling me to headhunt for him. And I was racking my brain of like, oh, what conservative gals do I know that would be good on a morning show in LA? And he was like, no, I want you to audition for the show. And so they flew me and my husband out. I had really only been to LA once before, went to the studios in Glendale, did live audition for 2 days. It was kind of like a trial by fire thing. Really never expected to be on air or as talent, as a host, and fell in love with it. It was a lot of fun. And I think for any foray into being on air, I mean, I'd done like Man on the Street and kind of like chit chat segments and stuff with Sean in the past. And I'd been paid as a consultant to do media training for people. But I think that I really lucked out at having Ben, who's like the smartest guy in the room, and Brian, who on his best days is really the funniest guy in the room. And then I just got to be there and kind of like tag along and have conversations and debate and fun with them. It was like an easy way to be introduced to the on-air side because I had these two guys to kind of help hold me up, not fall back on, but like help kind of hold me up and entertain and educate the audience with. So I loved that job. I still miss radio. Video did not kill the radio star. And I don't think that even podcasting just killed the radio star. I think that there's a lot of cohesiveness within those two mediums, but sorry, I digress. So then did that for 4 years, made LA our home, now have 2 more littles and the mother-in-law and the niece with us. Have worked at PragerU in the past, love the team over there. And then when Ben started Daily Wire, he brought me over there and had great times at Daily Wire. And now I'm doing stuff with the Washington Examiner. So I feel like that's a very long-winded way to be like, how did you get into media? But that's my resume in 10 minutes or less.
Have you been thinking about trying to discover your why and maybe defining your purpose a little more clearly? Well, I created a free 5-day email sequence that helps you do just that. It helps you dive into who you are, what your special talents are, and even pushes you a little bit out of your comfort zone with asking questions of people that are close to you. So go to callmeceopodcast.com to access that. And I have a little sneak peek of something up and coming about how to become a virtual assistant. So if that is something that you would think you might want to do in the future, stay tuned, get subscribed to the newsletter so you can hear about all the details because we will have special discounts for those who are subscribed to our email list. You can go there and find more information at callmeceopodcast.com or camillewalker.co. It's interesting for me to hear you talk about your progression with having experience over an official college education, which is what we're always told, get it. That's where the jobs lie. And sometimes that's the case. However, I think you have always had an entrepreneurial spirit, obviously, if you were out hustling the neighborhood and doing all of those things. How do you instill that work ethic into your own children? Or how do you think you learned that from your parents?
So my dad was, the only child who was an Eagle Scout. He was 20 plus years in the Coast Guard, went to the Naval Flight Academy. And I always heard growing up his story of like, it took him like 3 tries to get into officers candidate school. Like, it wasn't an easy thing. Like educating himself and getting to the level of pursuing the career of being a pilot that he always wanted was hard. And I think that my parents aren't dum-dums. My mom's an RN and a certified doula, and now a small business owner, very successful small business owner in her own right. But I think seeing them work for what they had and realizing that nothing that they had was handed to them, in a lot of people's minds, they would be like the average, like upper middle class Americans, right? They're not millionaires, they're not billionaires, but they live a successful and a happy life where they are free to travel and see their grandkids and are providing jobs for other people, which I think is one of the most, other than like getting married, having lots of babies, I think giving other people work is like one of the most just things you can do and moral things that you can do. And so I admire and honor anybody who does that, whether it's one employee or, 10,000 employees. And so I think seeing that and their work ethic and drive, and like, it was always, my mom didn't want us to be just book smart. She wanted us to be street smart. She's like, I want to be able to drop you in the middle of the country and you be able to figure your way out back home without any help. I'm old enough. I'm a grandma millennial. I'm 35. So I'm old enough to remember like my first flip phone at 17. And my parents would let me drive like 90 miles one way to youth orchestra once a week in Texarkana, like without a cell phone. I'm like, man, parenting back then was different. Mm-hmm. So for our girls, I think part of the reason why I still I'm not working full time, but why I still choose to work is as a mom, being like my first full-time job, is because I want them to see me working and see me being a mom, so they know that both things are possible. And I think that they have good examples of people around them that are working and creating. And it's funny that you think I'm like entrepreneurial, because I actually would look at my husband and say that that's what he is as a small business owner of a creative agency. But I don't view myself in that way. I view myself as like a worker. And I always feel like I need and want to be doing something, but I don't necessarily view myself as like somebody that's like going to create a business from scratch, right? And I fully admire those people who do. And if you have any advice on how to instill that into my kids, I would totally take that. But I think what we're trying to do, based on what we saw our parents do, was just like live it out by example. And answering their questions. The 11 and the 7.5-year-old are starting to ask questions of like, well, how much does that cost? And like, where did that money come from? And when you go give a speech, like, why is it? And what do you talk about? And who do you talk to? And those kinds of things. We, interestingly, do not discuss politics in the home. But I feel like now, especially that I'm homeschooling, like when you're going through early American history, it's kind of going to naturally come up. And it's been fun to have those conversations with the girls about things. And it brings about a broader conversation about like humanity and good and evil and black and white, and how sometimes in life not everything is black and white. Bethany Mandel is a friend and a lady, Brandon, a great homeschool mom and writer. And she talked about like the beauty of, she thinks like people who have religious beliefs is that if you read the Bible, you see that even like King David was this great man with all of these awful failures. And that when you are a religious person, then you look at American history or world history, it's easier to comprehend the failings of like those really important men, because there's a whole book of all of the books of the Bible are about that. And I think that it's kind of that way. I have that perspective with politics as well. I think people try to adhere to, on both sides of the aisle, like, oh, this guy can do no wrong, he is the best, hoorah. And then that guy is going to end up disappointing you. So I feel like I'm totally rambling now and need another cup of coffee. But all of that to say, I think that having those conversations with our girls, having those discussions, and really like, we're not like dream killers, but like so my brother-in-law is in music, and we've told them like Uncle Rick is rare in that he can be a songwriter producer and make enough money to take care of your Auntie Ray Ray and their baby. Uncle Rick tried to be a singer and it didn't work out for him, and he pivoted. And that sometimes in life, you might want to be a prima ballerina, but that ain't going to happen. And you have to pivot. And I 1,000%, I'm very much of the Gary V micro mindset, and talk to them about like, you don't have to go to college. There are the jobs that you do need to go to college. There are the jobs. And I think even nowadays, like you just pay for college for the networking and like alumni opportunity, right? And there are the schools that exist where that is a good opportunity or potentially a good investment for you. But there are other roles in which that's not necessary. And I have never once been asked, when somebody looks at my resume, where I went to college and what my GPA was.
That is such a good point. I think that our society is changing as a whole with the different perspectives of what finding your path truly looks like. And I'm curious because you reference about speaking and sharing airtime with Ben Shapiro. That to me, that would be so intimidating because he is I love how factual he is when he approaches debate. And he's also really good at it. What did you learn from him as far as presenting your ideas, and how did that affect the way you speak to your audience? And also, what was your experience in working with him? Was he supportive of you as a woman and also buoying you up in that way? It sounds like he was in the way that you spoke of him before. Tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, there's a story that I love to tell people about Ben, that once he was asked by a boss, well, should we hire Elisha because she'll be good at this job, or should we hire Elisha because she's your friend? And he said both. And I appreciated that about him. And yes, 1,000%. Ben does not see gender as something that he looks at as like, oh, we need to hire more women. He does genuinely look at, we need the best person for the job. And I always appreciated that about him as well. And when he did stuff at Truthful and then at Daily Wire, I think I was kind of in roles where I'm pretty personable, and he would readily admit that he is not. Like, he loves to do campus speeches and meet kids and like inspire people and help people. But it's not like I'm an extrovert. I'm like, yay, people. Like, my 7.5-year-old is just like me. She's Miss Congeniality in the making. Like, just everybody at her school pre-COVID knew her name, and she'd probably be class president one day. Like, that's just it. And Ben, I think because of his smarts and his work ethic, has gotten to a place where everybody in the room knows his name. But if he wasn't Ben Shapiro, he wouldn't be the guy that's like mingling with everybody in the room. Mm-hmm. And so he's good at picking and I think surrounding himself with people who can be that. And also just having a really good team and hiring the right people for that. There is many a time that chauvinism and stupidity and sexism existed in locations and meetings when he came to my defense, which I super credit and appreciate, because he's just a gentleman. And I think that he is kind of like, he's just a good guy first, and then he's a conservative. And I wish that people kind of understood that and knew that about him. I think something that I learned from him was, I'm obviously a chronic oversharer and love to elaborate. And I learned from him, and I think I'm still trying to learn from him, is that sometimes you just need to present the facts and then see what the other side says, instead of like, I think lots of people on the right side, especially in commentator world, like to be like, well, here's the facts and yada, like, this is why it matters, or this is what I think, or you're a dum-dum, and go to like that, the fact and then some, where Ben is just like, here it is. There you go. Make up your own mind. And yeah, I think back to the women's thing, like he has said, in case people didn't know, his wife is a doctor, and his sisters are all in their own right so talented and successful. His mother is talented and successful. His dad for a long time was like the stay-at-home dad. And I think in their community and in that generation, it's pretty unique. And so he's an all-around good guy, and I adore him. And I joke that he's my brother from another mother.
That's amazing. I love hearing about that, especially in the political world where there really aren't, I mean, I don't know what the percentages are, but there aren't as many women as there are men. So to hear that there's that support and that that's something that's progressing and continuing to make improvement is really encouraging. Building a successful business takes a clear understanding of your goals and where you want to go. That is why I love Cube Money. It is an app card combo that allows me to assign a purpose to each dollar in my checking account. No more wondering where you stand in regards to your bills, because with each transaction, you make a mental check-in with your balance. Create goals and stick with them in your lifestyle and business so you can live more and stress less. Go to cubemoney.com/Camille to get started today. That's Cube spelled QUBE money.com today, and make those dreams a reality. I know that you have a huge passion for helping young women also in finding their path and feeling empowered in who they are. What would you say to those who are listening in ways that they could help buoy up their daughters, or maybe perhaps a young woman who is listening? What would you say to them who want to become empowered, independent, and allow their voice to be heard, not only in their own homes, but in politics and in their workforce?
Yeah, I think that everybody's cost benefit analysis is going to be different. And I get this question a lot when I do Q&A at campus events or high school events through Young America's Foundation, which is an incredible organization that everybody should look into. And, if you are a young lady on the campus of Berkeley who has an administration and professors and fellow students who want to silence you, and you have the goal of potentially being an Amy Coney Barrett or Ruth Bader Ginsburg one day, your risk calculation of when you speak up and how you speak up is going to be different, because you can't get a failing grade from a jerk professor because you need to get into Harvard Law, But if in some cases, you're going to have the cost benefit analysis of being like, I'm willing to risk X, Y, or Z because I am seeing another student harassed or targeted for their beliefs. And I need to say something, or I need to do something, or I see the administration totally rebuking and disobeying their own rules. Like, there's a fantastic young lady that runs the YAF chapter at Ole Miss, and they had a room reserved for my speech. That was about the importance of free speech, by the way, in the First Amendment. And an administrator at the School of Journalism canceled the venue last minute and cited the rules of the school. And she copied and pasted like the rules of the school and was like, no, you're lying. This is not the case. And then went public with it in the media. And she took a risk in doing that. Thankfully, the school reversed the decision. The president of the university called and apologized to her and me. But in doing so, she stuck her neck out there. And I think potentially emboldened and positively influenced other young women to do the same on both sides of the aisle. Because I think abuse of power is evil no matter who's doing it. And I was actually talking to a mom over the weekend of a teenage girl, and I was talking about teenage girl problems. And I was saying, I think it's important for us to teach our girls, and it's how do you teach them that they are going to influence someone, and you never quite know who you're going to influence. And part of being independent and strong is being self-aware, but also aware of your surroundings and who you are influencing and how you are potentially influencing. And so I tell my 3.5-year-old, oh, you don't like it when your baby takes your toy? Well, did she see you do that? Or I tell the 7.5 and the 11-year-old, you are the oldest. You are responsible for being a good example to your little sisters. And then I have to remind myself in those moments where I want to be like, why did I just step on a Lego in your room when you're supposed to clean them up before bed? Oh, I shouldn't raise my voice because I am being an example to them. And so whether you're a stay-at-home mom or the CEO of a corporation, you are of influence and you are able to help and support and mentor and encourage and be an example to other women and girls in your life. And just never take that really seriously. Don't underestimate that role that you have.
Absolutely. It's funny because today, now more than ever, it's in our own home, and we can't decide whether we influence someone for the good or the bad. It's more, we have to make our choices, and then the consequence follows. We don't get to choose, right? We're only in charge of that consequence or the choice, not the consequence.
Well, and I do talk about consequences a lot because I say that there can be a positive or negative reaction to your action.
Right.
And there are always consequences, and consequences aren't always a negative thing. Sometimes there are positive consequences for your decisions. So if at 10 years old, you decide to start putting away $100 a month, you're going to have positive, the consequences of that is going to be positive when you're 65 and want to retire. But if you're 10 years old and decide you want to eat ice cream every day, turns out by the time you're 20, you're probably going to be obese and have the negative consequences of that. And so we try to discuss those with the girls as well. But I think really I think I'm a small government minded constitutional conservative, partly because I believe in the importance of the individual and the equality of the individual and their own personal rights and how they choose to live their life affect others. And I think that if people just taught their kids the importance of individual responsibility and not taking offense at every little thing that is said or done, specifically in this all social media world all the time that we live in, the world would be a much better place.
I agree. And that leads me to my next question. That is, we are living in such a tumultuous, politically charged environment, socially and in our media, and it's now affecting our schools and everything else. Oh my gosh. And how do you balance that in the home and also make it so that you have peace in your own heart and mind and in your own home? How do you navigate that? And how would you suggest to our listeners that they navigate that with their own minds and their families?
Yeah, well, we don't talk politics in our house, which is kind of funny. the girls will be like, oh, are you on TV by yourself? Or are you on TV with Uncle Ben? Like, that's the extent of it. Or if they like, what did you talk about? And I'm like, oh, government, politics, Hamilton.
What about Hamilton?
What about
your expanded family though? Because I feel like I get together with like my siblings and my parents who never
totally
talked about politics before. And now everyone's talking about it. So talk to me about that. So your kids,
I feel like
they're little enough that,
Yeah, I feel like in the age of COVID, everything is political too, which is kind of funny. It's like now it's become like a left-right thing, depending on how you feel about the vaccine or masks or like shutdowns and all this stuff. So it comes up. And I'm a political nerd through and through, but there are definitely times where I'm like, I don't want to talk politics. And so you have the friends that you don't talk politics with. But when it comes up, I typically this goes back to basic manners. If it's my home, I can steer the conversation. If it's someone else's home, they can steer the conversation. And I will listen and be respectful. And like, if engaged or asked a question, then of course I'm going to respond. I don't like it when people like change their answers or what they do and say. And I've seen this personally and professionally a lot, depending on who the audience is. Mm-hmm. I find that like that type of chameleon has no backbone and really bothers me like to a core. So I just try to be consistent and kind. And 95% of my family is very conservative too, but we still disagree on things. And, my mom will say something about Trump and I'm like, eye roll, but she's my mom and she's my girl's Nana. And like, that's more important than who voted for what, the last time around or who will vote for who the next time around. Mm-hmm. And I definitely like one of the speeches that I give is like, in your right to offend, which I believe is one of the rights of the First Amendment, is the freedom to offend or be offended. Don't be an a-hole. Yeah. And and I think this is something that conservatives should do much better. When you develop a relationship with people and they know you as Mrs. Krauss or so-and-so's mom or Eric's wife or Karen's daughter-in-law or that lady that volunteers at church, and the school is like the room parent or whatever. Then once they figure out what you do, or in your audience's case, then once they figure out what you believe politically, like they're not just going to be as easily offended at the Facebook post that you made because they know, oh, well, Mary's really nice. She brought me cookies like on my birthday, or she made a casserole when my dad died. Or, Joe was super cool and like let me use his snowblower like when mine broke. Like when you have those neighborly connections and like this all folds into politics is local and the president of the United States is not the end all be all. Like it is the school board. It is the city council. It is your mayor, as we have seen, and especially in the age of COVID. And part of your discussion of politics with your friends and family is going to be just about who you are as a person apart from your politics. Yes. And that's more important.
Yes. Oh, yes. I love all of that. I agree with you 100%. One thing that I want to tap into before I let you go today is the balancing mom, work, life, everything. Oof. And there's a social post here I wanted to share with the audience as they're listening. And it says, real life, me lacing up my shoes while telling my 3.5-year-old to get out of my makeup bag while getting a phone call that the driver is ready to take me to the TV hit while the hanger from a look they just arrived is thrown out of the way on the unmade bed in the bedroom that needs to be vacuumed while I also notice that I need to fix my TV lashes. All real, all messy, all wonderful, all the time. I love that post so much. And I messed up the Rent the Runway hanger there and right there in the middle. Tell me a little bit about your best tips for those listening of how you balance motherhood and work life. And I know there's no such thing as a perfect balance, but how do you try to create a harmony within that?
Yeah, I think prioritizing and sometimes taking the moment to set the phone aside and like engage with your children and your spouse and ignore the fact that the dryer is broken and you're having to hang dry things like the girls say, Mall Wilder. That's what they're calling me now. They're like, you're like Mall Wilder. And this is a point where like connecting with your spouse about the things that they prioritize too. Because sometimes I can be like super stressed about something that I didn't get to do that day. And my husband's like, I don't care. And just him being like, I don't care. I'm like, whew, load off. Or, I know that the kids like don't care if we're perfectly on track with their history for the week. And like, they don't care if we have to play catch up one day because I decided to take them to the playground or the beach, and like taking those moments to like give yourself a break. My girlfriend, Mary Catherine Ham, who's a fantastic author and writer and CNN contributor, often says, and I was like, you should make that a cross stitch during COVID because it's a cross stitch that I would do and hang on my wall. Give yourself a break, but don't make excuses. And so that with that motto in mind, and also what do I need to prioritize? So like as a Christian, I have like my faith priorities, which means that my family is a priority. And then all of these other things beneath it are a priority. So what am I going to do that's a priority for my faith and my family today? And then if the kitchen floor is a mess, it's not the end of the world. But I know that like my husband prioritizes like a nice home and is a major more clean freak than I am, than he does like dinner being ready at 6 o'clock. So then from that, there's like the broader life priorities and then your littler daily priorities. And just trying to consistently check in with your spouse and yourself to be like, what are those priorities today? And how can I kind of have some balance? And then I think really, like I said, I'm an extrovert and I love our girls and I love our family, but I'm like, I need to start exercising. I think the more, I call it like the oxygen mask principle, where we actually just flew back from Phoenix last night with our 2 littles, just me and the husband. The 2 littles went for a quick trip to see some friends. And on both of the flights, the flight attendants come up to us and are like, you guys know if the oxygen mask, like is engaged, to put yours on first before the children. And I'm like, yes, thanks. Got it, flight attendant. But that's like needs to be a rule for life, I think, for moms. I don't love this whole self-care, your truth crap all the time. But there is an element of like, if I cannot take care of myself, if I do not put the oxygen mask over myself and give myself that life breathing, H2O that keeps my body pumping and going, then I can't help my children that are right next to me. And if I can't like step away and go get a massage or have like coffee with a friend or do a workout or a podcast, then that's going to trickle down into how I treat them and how much I am there for them. So I don't know if that makes any sense to anyone but me in my own fried brain. But yeah, that's how I think I tried to maintain balance.
No, that made perfect sense. I mean, it's funny. We both flew back from Phoenix. I was there just 2 days ago too. And I think that
missed you.
I know we could have high-fived, but I really feel like tapping into that oxygen mask first is essential. It just all comes down to that, because if we are an empty well, we have nothing to give. So
yep.
I appreciate you squeezing us in. I know that you are so busy. Please tell our audience where they can find you and help support you and your message.
Yeah. So I'm Elisha, Elisha Krauss, Elisha Krauss. It's a Jewish dude's name. That's what Ben tells me all the time and laughs about. On Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. I'm not into the TikTok. Sorry, because I'm a grandma millennial, like I said. And then, of course, the Lady Brains podcast is me and a whole bunch of awesome girlfriends. And we don't talk politics over there on the Ricochet Network. And I do the weekly Washington Examiner Newsmaker series. So you can find those on YouTube or over at the Washington Examiner website.
Awesome. Well, again, Elisha, thank you so much for being here. It's been an absolute joy to interview you today.
Thank you.
If you enjoyed today's show, I would love for you to subscribe and come hang out with me over on Instagram at Call Me CEO Podcast. I love it when you come over there, continue the conversation, tell me what you loved most about this episode. Thank you, and I will see you next time.